The subsistence of the rational soul after the death of the body. Question: after the body has been cast off and the spirit has taken flight, through what will the rational soul subsist? Let us suppose that those souls who are aided by the outpourings of the Holy Spirit attain true existence and everlasting life. But what becomes of those rational souls who are veiled from God?
Answer: some hold that the body is the substance, and that it subsists by itself, and that the spirit is an accident which subsists through the substance of the body. The truth, however, is that the rational soul is the substance through which the body subsists. If the accident, the body, is destroyed, the substance, the spirit, remains.
Secondly, the rational soul or the human spirit does not subsist through this body by inherence. That is to say, it does not enter it. For inherence and entrance are characteristics of bodies, and the rational soul is sanctified above this. It never entered this body to begin with, that it should require upon leaving it some other abode. No, the connection of the spirit with the body is even as the connection of this lamp with a mirror. If the mirror is polished and perfected, the light of the lamp appears therein. And if the mirror is broken or covered with dust, the light remains concealed.
The rational soul, the human spirit, did not descend into this body or subsist through it to begin with, that it should require some substance to depend upon after the constituent parts of the body have decomposed. On the contrary, the rational soul is the substance upon which the body depends. The rational soul is endowed from the beginning with individuality. It does not acquire it through the intermediary of the body. At most, what can be said is that the individuality and identity of the rational soul may be strengthened in this world, and that the soul may either progress and attain to the degrees of perfection, or remain in the lowest abyss of ignorance and be veiled from and deprived of beholding the signs of God.
Sorry, I was muted. I'll just go ahead and read the rest of this page.
Sure.
Question: through what means can the spirit of man, the rational soul, progress after departing from this mortal world? Answer: the progress of the human spirit in the divine world after its connection with the physical body has been severed. It's either purely through the grace and bounty of the Lord, or through the intercession of prayers or other human souls, or through the significant contributions and charitable deeds which are offered in its name. Question: what happens to children who die before reaching the age of maturity or before the appointed time of birth? Answer: these children abide under the shadow of divine providence, and as they have committed no sin and are unsullied by the defilements of the world of nature, they will become the manifestations of divine bounty, and the glances of the eyes of divine mercy will be directed towards them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we can go back. So maybe what I'll do is I'll read the first question quickly, and then on the answer, talk about, maybe we can make our comments. So the question was, after the body has been cast off, the spirit's taken flight, through what will the rational soul exist? So this already has an underlying assumption, right? The assumption actually is that the soul may need something for its subsistence. And then the questioner poses it with an example, saying, let's suppose those souls who were aided by the outpourings of the Holy Spirit attain true existence and everlasting life. Okay, because there was a chapter that covered that. So his question is, or I think these are Laura Clifford Barney's questions. So it's her question is, but what becomes of those rational souls who are veiled from God? So then Abdu'l-Baha actually starts to allow us to shift our frame of thinking by saying some hold that the body is the substance and that it subsists by itself, and that the spirit is an accident which subsists through the substance of the body. The truth, however, is that the rational soul is the substance through which the body exists. So he flipped it, he reversed it. If the accident, the body, is destroyed, the substance, the spirit, remains. So the body is the accident. An accident, as defined earlier by Abdu'l-Baha, means things that are subject to the changes and chances of the world. They're ephemeral, they can come together, and then they can fall apart. So if that body, which is an accidental phenomenon, and in other words, not an essential phenomenon, because he defined the opposite of accident as essential in another chapter. He says that the substance, which is the spirit, remains. Okay. Any questions on this? Thoughts? This is pretty straightforward, like Baha'i 101. So should you like to read the second one?
Sure. Secondly, the rational soul, or the human spirit, does not subsist through this body by inherence. That is to say, it does not enter it, for inherence and entrance are characteristics of bodies, and the rational soul is sanctified above this. It never entered this body to begin with, that it should require upon leaving it some other abode. No, the connection of the spirit with the body is even as the connection of this lamp with a mirror. If the mirror is polished and perfected, the light of the lamp appears therein, and if the mirror is broken or covered with dust, the light remains concealed.
What do you think, Sorush?
Yeah, I mean, here the mirror is the body, right? I'm thinking, like, I guess in that analogy, like, once the mirror is broken, it's kind of irrelevant. Like, the mirror doesn't get fixed, you know? I guess when the body dies, the soul is still existing. So it's not a perfect analogy. Like, you know, the mirror is purely physical, and the light is also physical, you know. So, anyways, um, but you know, I like that analogy, and you know, if the mirror is covered with dust, you can wipe it off. If it's broken, I don't know what you want to do about that. You know, hopefully, in the next life, you know, the light or the spirit is still going to be progressing.
Any thoughts, Justin? Thank you, Sorush.
No, but also somebody else has joined us in case you didn't realize it.
The participants for iPhone. Hello, iPhone. Reveal thyself. Who is it? Don't know who it is.
It's Manav.
Wow. All right.
Manav.
Manav.
Justin, I have seen you. Justin, I have not seen you in quite a cycle. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a long time. It's kind of hard to hear you though, Manav. But yeah, it's been a long time since we hung out. I think you're in Northern California, right?
Near the waterfall. It's great. And yeah, I just went on a cross-country road trip from Atlanta.
We lost him.
Well, let's continue.
Okay, that's he's coming back.
Manav, your connection's a little bit unstable. All right, let's just continue.
Yeah, I'm out in the middle of the woods, but it's better than nothing, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you joined
Yeah,
us. Maybe without the
yeah,
video, the signal will go through for the audio portion better.
yeah. Thank you for joining us. Suraj, can you put it up a little bit more? Yeah. Okay. The rational soul, the human spirit, did not descend into this body or subsist through it to begin with. That it should require some substance to depend upon after the constitute parts of the body have decomposed. On the contrary, the rational soul is the substance upon which the body depends. The rational soul is endowed from the beginning with individuality. It does not acquire it through the intermediary of the body. At most, what can be said is that the individuality and identity of the rational soul may be strengthened in this world, and that the soul may either progress and attain the degrees of perfection, or remain in the lowest abyss of ignorance and be veiled from and deprived of beholding the signs of God. So yeah, this is just saying that, reiterating what was said above, but like the soul is not really dependent on the body, and that it's really the soul that is the important part, not the body. The body will come and go, but the soul really is the part that understands or that makes decisions, and that it can be strengthened in this world as well.
Yeah. And how does this contrast with like philosophies of previous dispensations, that, or at least the philosophies that the people of like the previous dispensations have tried to come up with, like Christianity, Islam, Hinduism? How do, or any of you guys know how does it differ? Like, for at least for me, when I see, we've seen cartoons where like somebody dies and their spirit is like this magical thing that comes out and like a little poof, like smoke, and dissipates out. And a lot of people, especially in the Christian world, they believe that that's how it is, that wherever your body is, that's also where your soul is. And so Abdu'l-Baha, so he went further in this analogy to say that it's not even conditioned upon any kind of entrance or exit in a material standpoint or any standpoint of this body. All we can say is that there's an association, and he links that association with the same as there's an association between the light and a mirror. And he says that that's it. There's an association, but there is no actual geolocation for the soul when it's entering or exiting, that the soul is exalted above such thoughts and ideas. And then this is also the basis of which why when you have the ascension and descension of a manifestation of God, it's still the same way. So we can extend this to see how, if one were to understand this passage, then naturally one would not think that in the second coming of Christ, right, that Christ would descend physically with clouds, right? That this descension and that ascension they must also be spiritual in nature. So in Christianity, for example, an unbalanced significance is given to the state or the importance of the body, undue importance, so much so that the definition of death and being born again is its foundation is physical, and so is the miracle of resurrection, right? So Christ is special because of all the prophets sent to man. He's two things: one, the Son of God, and then two, he had power over death, like physical death. He was able to reanimate his body after crucifixion, and then take his body with him to heaven. And so with that same body, one day during the end of during the judgment day, he will come back. And then whoever is, and then you get into these fractions of different sects of Christianity, and some will say, and then it's at that point where whoever's been, buried for who knows how long, they will be resurrected physically. So then you get these notions of Halloween and bodies coming out of graves. So all of these, the derivatives of all of these fantastic ideas, because of this lack of understanding that the soul is not something that goes in and out of anything. Interesting, for thousands of years, right? Now Abdu'l-Baha is saying this, stop. That's not how it works. So the body is an intermediary for the progress of the soul, but it's not the only method for the progress of the soul. And then let's go to the next one. You want to go back to that? Sorush, you could do question answer for that first one.
Question: through what means can the spirit of man, the rational soul, progress after departing from this mortal world? Answer: the progress of the human spirit in the divine world after its connection with the physical body has been severed is either purely through the grace and bounty of the Lord, or through the intercession and prayers of other human souls, or through the significant contributions and charitable deeds which are offered in its name.
Okay. This one, any thoughts on this, Sorush, as far as is it significant to you in perspective of this world's progress, and maybe some reasons why this world is so important for our progress? You and of course Justin as well.
It's a good question.
What was the specific question? Sorry.
It says the progress of the human spirit, after the connection of the body is severed, what's the operation of that progress? And basically he's confined it to these three: grace and bounty of the Lord, or through intercession. Yeah.
With this, I think if you think back to book 1, the third unit, it looks at, or it starts to explain that the soul actually never leaves like the Apple kingdom. It's continually there. It's just that at conception, a bond is created with that potential body that grows in this world, and then after death, that bond is disconnected. So I think also this sort of idea that that soul or that spirit is inside of us is also sort of a wrong way to kind of look at it. It's still there. It's just it has an attachment to this world because we're alive. But once we die, then it's free to continue on the way that it should. But yes, like you said, we affect it. The good and bad that we do in this world either strengthens or weakens that soul.
I read somewhere, thank you, Justin, and I read somewhere, I think I might have bookmarked it, but Abdu'l-Baha was talking about how the connection of the soul with the body, in terms of, it's not an all or nothing thing. It is, once the body is completely destroyed, the connection is completely severed. But while we're still alive, that connection can be weakened. And so for example, as our health deteriorates, or as we do things that affect our mind, it's like there's a tether. This tether might have many small wires, and they might start to get frayed. And that the connection can be weakened between the body and the soul. And that makes sense in the sense of like what dust does to a mirror. So these perfections so the soul can't have any imperfections, right? The soul can only acquire perfections. The imperfections are relative to not having developed those perfections, but there's no absolute negative quality. Like the soul isn't inherently evil, just like, darkness is the absence of light. So the soul can't have an inherent addition to a particular vice or anything. What it is that the ability to that soul to reflect its inherent power will be attenuated or muted or stopped altogether. So a pure heart, in a sense, is the same thing as having a healthy body for in the sense of the vehicle of the expression of the soul, right? So somebody might be confined to a wheelchair, for example, while their brain is or their mind is, perfectly free to think about the universe, like Stephen Hawkins. But this is the same thing with the heart. Like if the soul has an aspiration to do great things because it's created in the image of God, and it wants to aspire to that and wants to aspire, nearness to God, but the heart is not pure. In other words, it's drawn to the satanic side of human duality, the animal side of it, then that soul is trapped. And when we say ascension, it's like the soul is freed from the trappings or the cage of the body. It's also being freed from the desires of the body as well. So that soul is, when Abdu'l-Baha says, or Baha'u'llah says, that it could take flight. As you mentioned, Justin, it was always in the Apok kingdom. So how is it exactly that it's taking flight, right? So these are analogies to think about, but it's not sullied so that it can actually achieve its purpose in the realms that it was already what do you call it, already a denizen of. So then this begs the question, if the body's been severed, there's only 3 modes of substance as defined here. What about souls, for example, who didn't have much time to develop these qualities, and then which is the natural progression of this question, and then Abdu'l-Baha answers that as well, right?
Well, Shine, before we go on to that part, I wanted to still talk about this, because Abdu'l-Baha lists three different, answers, 3 different ways that the rational soul subsists after, or progresses, right, after departing from this mortal world. But I'm kind of thinking like this is kind of the same as like the way that the soul progresses before it departs, So the soul can, through the grace, obviously it's through the grace and bounty of the Lord. I mean, I don't know how else it would, progress. Um, through the intercession of prayers from other people. Well, I'm thinking like you could pray for other people before they die, right? You could pray for, their health or well-being. You can pray for their, spiritual well-being. You can pray for just the advancement, just their continued progress. I suppose you could probably pray for them, praying that they may progress after their ascension too, right? And then significant contributions and charitable deeds which are offered in its name. So this one is interesting to me, because I wish I knew which other chapter it reminds me of, but you know, basically when you do good deeds in other people's name, right? In a sense, I see that as their soul continuing to exert its influence on this world, right? Through the different people that have learned from that person. Like let's say someone composes a song, right? In a way, like that person continues to exert influence in this world, not even in just like a metaphysical way, that song that has been composed, like is going to be continued to be sung, for however long. And that's one way I can clearly see like a person continue to, affect the world after death is, through their content that they've produced or stories that they've told that continue to be told, um, or just actions that they've performed that continue to be affecting the world, So I see that, well, I don't think that's really what Abdul Baha meant by, well, I guess that's significant contributions, right? It could be performed by them, but I'm guessing charitable deeds, significant contributions and charitable deeds offered in its name suggests that it's other people, besides that same person, who has departed. Um, and then charitable deeds. So like, um, maybe somebody, we dedicate like highways and stuff is a weird example. Like we name highways after people, but then we also like build things in honor of people, right? Like we build, um, I can only think of like benches for some reason, but like, you see benches a lot, like named after people, if you're walking on the trail and, maybe they just arbitrarily chose to name, someone who passed away after they made that bench. But it's possible that that there was a charitable deed performed and, like someone made something actually like in honor of someone, like offered in their name with them in mind, um, thinking about them. And really, in that case, it would be really the person who has died to continue, exerting their influence. So that's, and by continuing to exert influence in this world, I see that as, continuing to progress spiritually. Because, in Gleanings, I think it says like the soul that has um, remained true to its creator will true to its creator or faithful or something like that, um, will become possessed of a power, in the next life that it never had, power far greater than it ever had in this world. No pen can depict nor tongue describe. Um, so, I mean, this is, one way I can see that um, really um, clearly being manifested, right? And that we can clearly know. I mean, other ways, like I'm sure there's ways that we're not aware of, right? That the souls from the next world continue to affect and uplift us and continue to um, aid in our progress and advancement. So I'm sure there's ways that we're not aware about. Um, but I was just noticing that like these things like are kind of also applicable to those souls who have not departed from this world yet. Um, yeah. So, and also I wanted to say, like, I'm not so sure that this is like an exhaustive list. I feel like there might be other means that the soul progresses. I don't know. Like, I don't know if this is all the ways necessarily, that the soul can progress after departing from this mortal world. I might be wrong, but this is three ways. One of them is through the grace and bounty of the Lord, which I feel is pretty, obvious. Like, not this, it's true. It's a very good point to mention. But I feel like that's like almost I don't know what the word is, like obvious. Um,
Just finish, I think, sorry, finish your style. Sorry.
like redundant maybe. No, continue.
I was going to say also in book one, there are two statements which seem contradictory to each other, but they make sense when you put them together. So one says that the soul will continue to progress until it reaches God, pretty much.
Uh,
But then you have another statement that says the soul will never attain the presence of God, which when you put them together, to me means the soul will continually progress forever because
yeah,
it will keep going until it can reach God. But if it can never reach God, that means it just keeps going and going and going. So there is some progression, but maybe the level of progression changes once, things like charitable donations or prayers or things like that. Maybe that helps, but I think it's also beyond our understanding of what that actually means as well.
yeah.
On that theme, there is one thing that I remember reading by Abdul Baha where he says that the type of progress that's possible in the next world is actually so much more superior than any progress that you could attain in this world, so much so that one moment's progress there is that you can have infinite amount of time on the material plane to progress with all the right conditions, but it still won't be anywhere in significance as to the amount, the type of progress you can have over there, and like however would be defined as a moment over there. And this was in connection with that third one, or the next question, which is like what happens to children who die before reaching age of maturity. And so I really, yeah, this is obviously beyond us. This is a mystery, but the ability to progress, there's another question chapter here, and then some asked the question. He says the whole reason why man goes through this material world is because the soul, and as it acquires, in order to acquire perfections, it has to experience different things. So it actually traverses each kingdom. So it starts off in the mineral kingdom, which are all minerals and whatnot, and then there's a composition of a single cell organism, which is the fertilized egg, and then it divides, and then tissues are created. You could say but within that's like the vegetable domain, right? The vegetable kingdom, until it starts to acquire the capacity to sense its environment, and now it's entered the animal kingdom. Now, but of course, the soul is always a human soul. It's more like it's progressing to the level of ability to manifest the potentialities of that soul. So it could be restricted to the animal world in terms of expression, or it could be elevated to the human kingdom in terms of expression. But since that's the highest level in this world, in this material world, in order to continue to progress to its true station, it has to at that point then separate itself from the body, right? So in other words, there is an upper limit of what you can do. We obviously have powers that we are not able to express in this life, in this existence, that we have inherent abilities. Over here seems to be a way of doing a very hands-on, like immersion type of a like trial by fire to figure out, so that our soul figures out what it's supposed to do before it goes to the next world. And this is not too different than, for example, how the body's immune system works, where the immune cells have to be educated. They go to the thymus. They're made in the bone marrow, the white blood cells, but then they go into the thymus to be educated as to what constitutes self and non-self. And if you react too strongly to self, in other words, you can be that immune cell can potentially destroy your own body, then that cell is actually eliminated. And the ones that ignore everything, they're no good either, so they're eliminated as well. So it has to learn what to battle and what not to battle. But to be able to do that, it has to stay in a area that it's for its education, sequestered from the rest of the body. It learns, and then it's released into the bloodstream. So this world is similar in that sense. We come here so that we can actually be fit to, as Abdu'l-Baha says, to be fit to enter the kingdom. And it's not just a matter of but this fitness, requires purity, but it's not, the ideal isn't purity through ignorance, because, like childhood innocence. It's the soul that's been tested and remains pure, that then has a greater sense of understanding of itself and purpose. That is what allows it to be fit to enter the kingdom. And this entrance, of course, is an analogical one, right? It was always there, but it has to be able to appreciate it and hone its powers. So these are definitely mysteries that we don't know, but there are other books or there are other sources from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah who make that much more clear to us. And the range of abilities here, like this world, the soul is such that its progress will endure forever as long as God and his kingdom endures, as it says. But it's not dependent at all about what happens here. As he says, the changes and chances of this world will not alter the soul, its ability. It won't do anything. So it's not good or bad. It's part of just necessity of experience, and we all experience this world differently for a different duration of time, and that also adds to the tapestry, the richness of the souls that are in the next world. And so part of the beauty of our unity is that we create this, this mosaic of greater understanding by also pulling in our greater what do you call it? What do you call it? When we're here, like our experiences, we could pool our experiences. Consultation is a result of, the wisdom of consultation is take everybody's understanding and experiences, bring them together, formulate something so that understanding is greater than just any person's individual experience. And that's still, I'm not giving it justice, but so, and then there's this significant contribution, charitable deeds. Yeah, there was another chapter, if you remember, Sorush, about how, for example, the spirit of Christ is still influencing the people in this world today, right? So these actions that we do in this world, like a ripple in a pond, long before we disappear, those ripples still last. And depending on how significant the ripples are, they can reach across, ages, centuries. So we're still listening to, classical music composed by, Beethoven and Mozart. So their spirit, in a sense, is still in this world, is with us. And that's one distinction between human spirit and human soul, right? This idea that the human soul, this identity, has this spirit which radiates its influence into its environment, be it spiritual or material world. And then to finish off, there's a writing by Abdul Baha, which I think you and I studied by ourselves, but it talks about the degrees or the state of the soul, right? Its condition, and it's kind of like Seven Valleys, but it's not. It's actually a different way of whereas Seven Valleys talks about the progress of the soul, and its attaining to the beloved. This one was about the condition, the actual condition. It's almost like a psychological state of the soul, right? As far as like a soul is initially a demanding soul, is what it was written by Abdul Baha, that it is a very self-centered in a sense, doesn't know what can benefit it, what can bring it down, and then this soul needs enlightening. There you go. Thank you for finding it. And then that second, let's try to find the actual stages in this. Demanding or demanding, maybe. You can do commanding soul as well.
I don't know why it's not finding it.
ING. Okay, well, lately I've had issues with these search things. Commanding soul. But if you go down, you'll find it as a
Oh, there we are.
There we go. So this is interesting. I wish I had discovered this much sooner, like when I was in college. But this is actually not a bad idea to just look at these briefly, because many Baha'is haven't been exposed to this. So the human soul has following stages, Abdul Baha says, right? Well, first of all, it says the human soul, the rational soul within which arise the powers of the human being, the outer and inner senses, knowledge, sciences, arts, wisdom. It is also the place where dark passions and earthly failings appear. The human soul has the following stages. So the first primary stage. Thank you, Justin, for coming in. Justin, have you read this before you go?
I have seen this before. I don't know what is this
Stay where it
document?
was. Stay where it was.
I don't know if I've read this document, but this idea of the different stages, yes, I have read this before, but I don't know if it's specifically this document.
It might have been the commanding soul, the blaming soul, the inspired soul. I think Mr. Dunbar talks about this in one of his talks. The assured soul, the accepting soul, and the accepted soul.
Mm.
This accepted soul is something that's beyond the Seven Valleys. Actually, it's like a stage that's higher than anything listed in the Seven Valleys. The Seven Valleys, when it ends with true poverty and absolute nothingness, is at the level of maybe oh yeah, it's after F, but so after it's you know, what happened? The question is, well, what happens next after you reach the state of true poverty and absolute nothingness, right? It actually doesn't end there. Then actually you're invested with the powers of the powers of God to carry out his affairs. So I think that's pretty interesting. 11:28. We should wrap this up, guys. I actually want to kind of finish this off too. So let's go back to that. Can you still stay on for a few more minutes or no?
Sure. I'm just
Okay.
gonna kind of like wrap up my thing here, but yeah,
No
I
problem.
can.
So then the last thing was, what happens to children who die before reaching age of maturity, before the appointed time of death? They do abide under the shadow of divine providence, and since they have committed no sin and are all unsullied by the defilements of world and nature, they will become manifestations of divine bounty, and the glances of the eye of divine mercy will be directed towards them. So this is actually kind of vague, I think, right? What does that mean? But they're going to be in the center of divine eye of divine mercy will be directed towards them. But I don't think it's a way we should think about it as like God feels sorry for them and therefore allows them to, you know, either progress in one way or another. I think it's a little bit different than this. But like we talked about previously, the progress that is available in the next world is such that nothing in this world can rival it to begin with. So I think they're okay. They'll continue to progress and on a new line of existence, just as we progress here.
Now, my thing is though, like, he also says that progress in the next world is independent of, our individual efforts. So it requires prayer and intercession and the grace of God. And so that makes me think, like, if you're Adolf Hitler, right, and you really blew this life, you go to the next world, you're just like, so I can imagine the parable that Jesus gives from the Bible of the rich man who is burning in hell, thirsty and lost, while, the poor man who lives off the scraps outside the rich man's estate is he's basically like sitting with the angels in heaven. And so it's like the sense of, well, sure, there's way more progress over, but we can't just actively experience that.
Well, there's certain things about this world that make it unique to this world, which allows types of progresses that may not be available, or not types of progresses, but vehicles of progress that are no longer available. For example, in this world, the ability to do terrible things is not necessarily restricted by the hand of God, right? And so when people ask, like, well, why does evil exist in this world, is because of man's free will exists in this world. There's so much free will for good or bad. Thank you very much for Justin for joining us, and have a pleasant day at the unit convention. Halapa. So you have free will in this world, so you can do maximum good or maximum bad in this world. But it seems that in the Abha kingdom, since it's not a kingdom of imperfections, that this ability to do any maximum bad has been taken away from you. So the best that you could do is, or sorry, the worst, let's say, that you could do is just to do absolutely nothing. And by doing nothing, you're not progressing. And that in the next world, since there's no decline like there is here, that the non-progressing itself is itself a form of decline or a form of regression. So you don't want to do nothing, you want to do something, but among the somethings, only positive things are available for you to do. At least that's what it seems like to me. If I were to conclude how we can navigate logically after reading, the other factors of progress with other Baha'i writings. So you're confined to doing things. So over here, then there's more, let's say, tests, right? That's why the Abdul Baha says, for example, that the tests of humanity are confined to this world. These tests come from this ability to actually carry out your will or our will in the direction of evil. And in any situation, to some degree, either we are perpetrating an act of evil or somebody else is. But regardless, any act will have its influence on everybody else and everything else. So positive act will have positive influences on everybody and everything, and so will negative. So either you are generating tests for yourself and other people, or other people are generating tests for themselves and on you. You can't separate it. And through these tests that we impose on each other, our soul is given a choice on what to do with that test. And then can we add it? Do we add to the evils, or do we mitigate the evils and we try to add instead to the positive direction? And by making these conscientious decisions on a daily, on a moment by moment basis, we're strengthening our soul to stay upright, to stay in the path of God, to not deviate, to keep the heart pure. So you see what I mean? Like, it's easy for a shirt that's been dry cleaned, that's in its plastic thing, to stay dust free, right? Dirt free, to stay unsullied. But the true test is if you take this shirt and you go out and do some like heavy labor on it, then what happens to that shirt? And I think we would agree that, if somebody were to create, and they do have sprays now, like a spray where you could spray it on your clothing, which will keep the dust or grime like from actually settling on it, people will be like, wow, that's amazing, that's a miracle, and they would buy it, right? So that shows the significance. Like, it's more there's more merit in living in an unsullied environment, but not allowing that environment to affect you. And we see that in the analogy of the lotus, right? Where the lotus is growing in these dirty conditions, but out of this, I think it's like stagnant water, for example, dirty water, it comes out this beautiful, beautiful plant with such pure color, like a beautiful white. So that's just we naturally we respect that. I want to say we have a lot of respect for such things, like the person who, despite all obstacles, made it far in life. We give that type of a person much respect. So it's not too different. But if anything was just given to you, or obstacles were always open to begin with, even though you still have to put in effort to achieving that thing on your own, that there were no external barriers causing you unnecessary inefficiencies, there's some level of respect that you can't go beyond that. Like, you could take two people, they don't even have to be at the same state. Like, if somebody has perfect health and excellent genes, they can win the gold medal in some Olympic, let's say it's like a track, you can win a gold medal for being the fastest runner, and we give them accolades. But then we also have the Special Olympics, or sorry, Special Olympics later, and also the Paralympics, right? So now we are doing things within where that human condition, that soul may have exerted even more effort than the person who won the gold medal in the Olympic as an Olympic champion. But then they can't even achieve 1/10 of that, but what they did do is they still hit the wall. They hit the limitations of their body in their own unique circumstances. And that is what's most acceptable, most praiseworthy to God. So when we think about it that way, for example, Abdul Baha says, or Baha'u'llah says, that each person's, like, the whole duty, like the duty of man is to obtain his portion of the flood of grace, right? Which God unleashes on the world. It's like rainwater. Like, you might have a gallon that you can fill up, you might have a thimble that you could fill up, but that's not important. How much, the capacity isn't important. What's important is that you fill it to the brim. And that's what God wants from each and every one of us. So he deliberately created circumstances for people where they have, by virtue of this world, limitations imposed upon them. And then in that sense that yields diversity in the world. And he says, never mind that. Don't look at that. It's not important. Don't compare yourself to other people. What's important is you be the best that you could be in all circumstances. So at all times and under all conditions. So one day you might be perfectly healthy, and the other day you might not be at all. But either way, your job is to maintain your inner nobility and to progress, and do so in the state of radiant acquiescence. And that's not easy to do, right? But these things help to bring out the inherent nobility of man. And these are things that one can look at when one's passed away to say, wow, I was able to do this. I was able to do this. And one gets a greater awareness of one's true nature through that method. There's other methods as well, but that's a great one. Right? So this is an interesting.
I agree.
Go ahead. Yeah. This is an interesting chapter. It's short, and there's definitely a lot more that can be discussed of it. But Abdul Baha's main point here to get the reader to get out of the limited thinking of the body being the independent agent, and the soul being either a byproduct or a dependent agent. He says is absolutely wrong. It's the other way around. And he did, and in doing so, he's forcing the thinking, the paradigm to shift. And once that shifts, then that'll influence people's cultures as well. The culture of Halloween or Day of the Dead, as the Latin American countries celebrate, or the resurrection, anything pertaining along those lines. All those things are seen as superstitions that will eventually be blotted out from common thinking.
I just wanted to add that people who believe that we are born sinners would probably fully agree with this last sentence. Children who pass away, between the time of conception and the time of birth, have not committed sin, because they have not been born. So, so I think it would make perfect logical sense, and it'd be interesting to, see
Well,
what
it seems
they
logical for
say.
us. Well, it seems logical for actually. It's talking about people who have been born. The children who die before reaching, so they're still alive in this world. But actually, there
Well,
was.
no, or before the appointed time of birth, right?
Well, it says either before maturity or before the time of birth. Oh yeah, I could see that they would definitely agree with the latter, which is the appointed time of birth. But it's been pretty controversial as to the state of children before the age of before baptism. So, I remember reading in my history of in European history, Middle Ages, Christianity, Christianity. I forgot which centuries it would have been specifically, but it wasn't just 1 or 2 centuries anyway. That priests, the clergy would be, had a dilemma, like, well, what do you do? Because, for example, during Europe in the Black Plague, you have all these people dying, right, including children. And well, there was this idea that you have to quickly baptize them so that they can go to heaven once they're dead. That was their idea. It's like you have to go baptize as many people as possible, or else these kids are not saved. They're doomed. So there's this idea that this child who has no intellectual capacity yet, or it's not mature enough to by free will accept who Jesus is, has to somehow be baptized in water, even as a baby, just so that it doesn't go to hell. It's like, how did they get to that idea that a baby, like every human being, will automatically go to hell unless saved by Jesus? Like that's basically their conclusion, their interpretation of born in sin. Yeah, and so I think that later on they got away with it. I think maybe in different churches, or it could have been through different saints or people who wrote apologies, where they said, well, it wouldn't make sense to do that, and here are some reasons. So maybe that sin, whether they have it or not, it's an automatic forgiveness. You don't have to baptize them. It wouldn't make sense anyway. But the fact that they actually had to philosophize over this rather than have that as the default thinking is what's, it's pretty interesting to me. But Abdul Baha, then what does he do? He actually completely gets rid of the notion of born in sin altogether, right? Abdul Baha gets rid of that. Nobody is born into sin. And even like one of the reasons why Jews have a difficulty with accepting Christ is that they actually have a difficulty accepting particular quote unquote teachings of Christ, which are actually more not as much teachings of Christ, but rather what is taught by Christians according to their understanding of Christ's teachings. So when Jews say, well, no, man isn't born into sin because of the transgression of Adam, etc., etc. So they don't believe it. They don't. Jews do not agree with original sin. That's a Christian concept. And so if you don't agree with this, then how are you going to accept the quote unquote teacher who taught that? And they don't. So, and there's a Jewish lady who became a Baha'i who actually told me this. He says that, as a Christian, like as a Jew, it's illogical. And it was through understanding, her recognition of Baha'u'llah that now she was actually able to understand the true Jesus Christ. And she had no problem accepting the, Jesus Christ as Jesus Christ actually was and actually was taught. It's the Christian superstitions about Jesus Christ that a lot of Jews have difficulty with, in this day and age. Something to keep in mind when talking to Jewish people about Jesus or about Baha'u'llah is that if you want to talk to Jewish people, talk about Baha'u'llah, and then you can offer what Baha'u'llah stated about Jesus, and that would be compatible with this essence of Jewish teachings. So that's that.
Really good discussion, trying to.
Well, thank you for participating. I enjoy doing this.
Yeah.
Any other further comments or questions before we end it?
No, I got all my, thoughts. I was able to comment all my thoughts and everything that occurred to myself. But yeah, this was really good. I wasn't expecting, it seemed like a pretty simple, straightforward chapter, and we had a lot of good thoughts, good contributions.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm gonna
And
stop. I'm gonna stop
yeah,
recording
there's
here.
too much more to talk about. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.